This Sunday is the third Sunday in Ordinary Time, Year B. This Sunday's first reading is from the book of Jonah. This is the only Sunday Mass to include a reading from the book of Jonah in any year, A, B or C. The book of Jonah itself is only 3 pages long. The book tells the story of a man named Jonah who was sent by God 800 years before Jesus to go east to a place called Nineveh and to warn the people there that they will be punished for their bad behaviour. But Jonah tries to get away from God. He goes west to Joppa, now southern Tel Aviv in Israel, and gets on a boat heading further west across the Mediterranean to a place called Tarshish. A huge storm brews up and the boat looks like sinking. The sailors blame Jonah for trying to get away from God. Jonah had been silly enough to tell them what he was doing. Jonah invites the sailors to throw him overboard to calm the storm and save the sailors, and they do throw him overboard. A large fish swallows Jonah alive. A fish, not a whale, maybe some type of shark. After 3 days, God commands the fish to give up Jonah. Of course, the fish obeys and returns Jonah to dry land. This week's first reading starts there, immediately after the fish returns Jonah to dry land. Jonah will finally go to Nineveh, and the people there will listen to God's warning and change their ways. The book of Jonah was written about 600 years before Jesus. It may well have been based on the story of a real man, but it is likely that the story in some parts, at least, is a fictional fable. At the time the book of Jonah was written, Nineveh was the largest city in the world. The city was considered to be an enemy of Israel. These days, the area is known as Mosul in northern Iraq. Even today, that is a 14-hour drive from Israel. We don't know exactly where Jonah tried to escape to. Tarshish may have been a place as far away as Spain or even Britain. We do know one other thing about the legendary Jonah from the Book of Kings. Jonah's hometown was Gath Hepher. Gath Hepher was a small village only 5 kilometres north of Nazareth, in the mountainous area of northern Israel known as Galilee. Jesus could have walked there in an hour and a half. So the story of Jonah was a very special story to the locals in the time of Jesus. A 3-page book, 600 years old, about a legend just up the road. So sometimes Jesus used the story of Jonah as a familiar way of explaining things to his friends and enemies. The second reading this week is from Paul's letter to the Corinthians. It's a difficult one. For example, Paul says, "Those who have wives should live as though they had none." Paul is referring to Christ's resurrection as the dawn of a new time, but personally, I think he could have explained that differently. This Sunday's Gospel is from Mark. John the Baptist had been arrested by King Herod for criticising Herod's marriage to Herod's brother's wife. Jesus is at the Sea of Galilee, which is actually a lake in Galilee, not particularly large. We hear the first words of Jesus in Mark's Gospel: "The time has come." Jesus finds Andrew and his brother Simon, who we met last week, casting a net into the lake. Jesus says, "Follow me, and I will make you into fishers of men." This is a classic example of Jesus using language that can be easily understood by the people he is talking to. These men were fishermen, but they left their nets behind to follow Jesus at once.